I was sitting alone in my hidden office when I received that unexpected text from Jackson. My whole life had been a competition with my golden brother, who excelled at everything while I was the disappointment. Our parents never missed an opportunity to remind me how I measured up against perfection. Last week I noticed someone following me, but I brushed it off as paranoia. Little did they know about the success I had built in secret. Before I tell you how my own brother tried to destroy me, let me know where you are watching from, and hit that like and subscribe button. Trust me, you will want to see how this ends. I grew up in Oak Ridge Heights, an affluent suburb outside Boston where success was measured by the colleges your children attended and the luxury cars in your driveway. Our house was the biggest on Maple Avenue, a sprawling colonial with perfectly manicured lawns that my father William took immense pride in maintaining every weekend. From the beginning, Jackson was the golden child. While I struggled with reading until third grade, Jackson was reading chapter books by kindergarten. When I finally managed to make the junior varsity basketball team as a bench warmer in 10th grade, Jackson was already varsity team captain with scouts from Duke and North Carolina attending his games. "Why cannot you be more like your brother?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, usually delivered by my mother Diana while shaking her head at my report card, showing mostly C's with the occasional B-. I still remember my high school graduation like it happened yesterday. Jackson, 2 years ahead of me, had returned from his first year at Harvard, where he was already making connections with future Fortune 500 CEOs and politicians. He had been invited to give a speech to inspire the graduating class since he had been valedictorian when he graduated. Success comes to those who refuse to accept anything less than excellence. Jackson proclaimed from the podium his perfectly tailored suit, making him look like he belonged in a business magazine cover. The audience erupted in applause while my parents beamed with pride. Meanwhile, I was sitting among the graduates, barely having maintained the 2.5 gigapascals required to walk across the stage. My guidance counselor had called my parents 3 times during senior year, warning them I might not graduate. The only reason I passed calculus was because Mr. Calculus Thompson took pity on me and allowed a massive extra credit project at the last minute. College only widened the gap between us. While Jackson continued his streak of perfect 4 semesters at Harvard, I struggled through 2 semesters at Massachusetts State before dropping out. The university experience felt like high school all over again, but with more expensive textbooks and less supervision. I could not focus on lectures about subjects that held no interest for me, while my mind constantly raced with business ideas and technology concepts that no one around me seemed to care about. The family dinner after I dropped out remains burned into my memory. It was supposedly to celebrate Jackson receiving a prestigious summer internship at Goldman Sachs, but it felt more like my public execution. Jackson will be making more during his summer internship than most people with master degrees, my father announced to our extended family gathered around our dining table. Aunt Patricia clapped enthusiastically, while Uncle George slapped Jackson on the back. "And what are your plans now, Myron?" my grandfather asked, turning to me with that look of preemptive disappointment I had grown accustomed to. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Myron is taking some time to figure things out," she said with a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. The table fell into uncomfortable silence until someone mercifully changed the subject. That night, I made the decision to leave Massachusetts. I had been teaching myself coding for years in my bedroom, while everyone thought I was just playing video games. I had ideas that kept me up at night, concepts for software that could revolutionize how small businesses processed payments. I needed to get away from the suffocating expectations and constant comparisons. Seattle seemed far enough away to start fresh. When I told my parents I was moving, their reactions were exactly as expected. Running away from responsibility again, my father sighed, not even looking up from his newspaper. "What will you do for money?" my mother asked already, assuming I would call asking for help within a month. Jackson cornered me in the driveway as I packed my beat-up Honda Civic. "Listen, little brother," he said with that condescending smile, "not everyone is cut out for success. There is no shame in living a simple life. Just do not come crying when things get tough out there." I said nothing, but inside I was burning with determination. For once, I would prove myself on my own terms without their knowledge or approval. 3 months after I moved, Jackson showed up unannounced at my tiny studio apartment in Seattle. He claimed he was in town for a business conference, but spent the entire visit making snide comments about my living conditions. "This is actually your entire apartment?" he asked incredulously, looking around at my 400 square foot space. "I have closets bigger than this at my place in Boston." He picked up a programming book from my desk. "Still playing with computers, I see. When are you going to get a real job?" I never told him or my family what I was actually working on. Let them think I was just scraping by with odd jobs. The truth would be much sweeter when revealed at the right moment. My first year in Seattle was exactly as difficult as everyone expected it would be. I worked bar shifts at night and did freelance web design during the day. My apartment was the size of a storage unit, with a bathroom so small I could brush my teeth while showering. When the radiator worked, it sounded like angry demons were trapped inside the pipes, and when it did not, I slept in 3 layers of clothing. But unlike what my family thought, every spare minute and dollar went toward my vision. I attended every tech meetup and startup event in the city, often nursing the same free beer all night while making connections. That was how I met Trevor, a brilliant data analyst who was equally frustrated with the limitations of existing payment processing systems for small businesses. "The major players are all building for enterprise clients," Trevor said during our first real conversation at a hackathon. "Nobody cares about the coffee shop owner who loses 8% of each transaction to processing fees." We clicked immediately. Trevor had the business background I lacked, while I could build the actual software. We spent 6 months developing our prototype, working from coffee shops and my tiny apartment. I survived on ramen noodles and peanut butter sandwiches, often coding for 18 hours straight until my vision blurred. The rejections came hard and fast when we started approaching investors. "Your market is too niche. The big players will crush you if this actually works. Come back when you have actual customers and revenue." Each rejection only fueled my determination. This was not like school where I could just accept failure and move on. This was my vision, and I believed in it with everything I had. Our breakthrough came from Angela Chen, an angel investor who had built and sold 3 successful fintech companies. She saw what the others missed. "The traditional payment processors are dinosaurs," she said after our pitch. "They cannot move quickly enough to serve the changing needs of small businesses." Her initial investment of $200,000 allowed us to quit our side jobs and focus entirely on the platform. We decided to operate in stealth mode, not announcing our company publicly, to avoid attracting attention from larger competitors who might steal our approach before we could establish ourselves. That was when strange things started happening. I would notice the same blue Nissan parked outside different coffee shops where I worked. My apartment manager mentioned someone had been asking questions about my schedule. Once I could have sworn someone was photographing me through the window of a restaurant while I was meeting with a potential client. The paranoia reached its peak when Trevor found a small electronic device magnetized under my desk during a late work session at my apartment. "Dude, this is a listening device," he said, holding it up with wide eyes. "Like an actual bug. Who the hell would be spying on you?" I dismissed his concerns, suggesting it might be left over from previous tenants or some kind of building maintenance equipment. Deep down, a sinking feeling was forming in my stomach, but I could not afford the distraction of paranoia. The mystery resolved itself 3 days later in the parking garage beneath my apartment building. I was walking to my car when a middle-aged man in a worn suit stepped out from behind a concrete pillar. "Mr. Reynolds," he said formally, "I need to speak with you." My first instinct was to run, but something in his demeanor stopped me. He looked uncomfortable, almost apologetic. "My name is Harold Blackwell. I am a private investigator hired to gather information about you." My mind raced through possibilities. Credit card debt, an angry ex-client, some corporate competitor. "Who hired you?" I demanded. Harold sighed heavily. "Your brother Jackson. I have been following you for nearly 3 months now." The betrayal hit like a physical blow. My own brother had hired someone to spy on me. "He asked me to document evidence of your failures." Harold continued, looking genuinely uncomfortable now. "To find anything embarrassing or financially desperate in your life. I was supposed to compile a report with photos, recordings, bank information, anything showing you struggling or failing." Harold reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila envelope. "These are copies of my reports and some of the surveillance photos. There are also excerpts from your brother's instructions to me." I took the envelope with shaking hands. Inside were dozens of photos of me working at coffee shops, entering my apartment meeting with Trevor. There were also printouts of emails from Jackson to Harold. "Find anything that shows how badly he is failing." I need concrete examples of his pathetic life out there. Photos of his tiny apartment, documentation of any debts, evidence of failed business attempts. Be thorough. Another email made my blood run cold. The family reunion for my father's birthday is in 3 weeks. I need comprehensive documentation by then. I plan to show everyone exactly what Myron has been doing with his life. I looked up at Harold, trying to process the level of betrayal. Why are you showing me this? Harold shifted uncomfortably. I have been doing this job for 23 years. I have followed cheating spouses, insurance fraudsters, and corporate spies. But I have never been hired by someone so determined to destroy their own brother. And the thing is, the more I followed you, the more I realized you are not what your brother described at all. I had suspected my brother resented me for leaving, but I never imagined he would go to such lengths to expose me as a failure. That night, I received a call from my mother. Your father's 60th birthday is next month. The whole family will be there. This is not optional, Myron. Everyone is asking about you. I considered making excuses, but a new determination had formed inside me. I would attend the reunion, but I would not give Jackson the satisfaction of exposing me. My company was still in stealth mode for good reasons, and I intended to keep it that way despite my brother's schemes. As I hung up, I noticed a familiar blue Nissan pulling into a parking space across from my building. Despite our confrontation, Harold was still watching me. The game was not over yet. My parents' home looked exactly as I remembered it, imposing and perfect, from the meticulously painted shutters to the imported Italian marble in the foyer. Walking through the front door felt like stepping back in time to every uncomfortable family gathering of my childhood. The house was filled with relatives I had not seen in years, all of whom seemed surprised I had actually shown up. Aunt Patricia kissed my cheeks before immediately asking if I had found a real career yet. Uncle George clapped my shoulder too hard and loudly proclaimed I had filled out, which was his polite way of saying I had gained weight. Throughout the cocktail hour, I noticed Jackson moving from group to group, whispering while occasionally glancing in my direction. Whatever he was saying caused people to look at me with expressions ranging from pity to morbid curiosity. My cousin Thomas approached me at the bar, clearly uncomfortable. Hey Myron, is it true? You are living in some kind of shelter out west? He asked awkwardly. So that was the story Jackson was spreading. I simply smiled and changed the subject, asking about Thomas's new baby. Let Jackson play his games for now. Dinner was served in the formal dining room, a sprawling mahogany table set for 24 people with the family china and crystal that only emerged for special occasions. I was seated far from Jackson, next to elderly relatives, who mostly ignored me in favor of complaining about their various medical procedures. Midway through the main course, my father stood and tapped his knife against his crystal glass. The room fell silent as he began his speech about family legacy and the importance of making one's mark in the world. His eyes lingered on me briefly during his pointed comments about disappointment and unrealized potential. Some of us carry the family name forward with distinction, he said, raising his glass toward Jackson, setting examples for future generations. I maintained my neutral expression, pushing food around my plate and waiting for what I knew was coming. Sure enough, as dessert was being served, Jackson stood up with a self-important clearing of his throat. I would like to make a special introduction, he announced to the table. I have brought a business associate with me tonight, Harold Blackwell. Harold appeared from the living room looking deeply uncomfortable in a suit that seemed a size too large. He nodded stiffly to the assembled family. Jackson continued, his voice dripping with fake concern. I have been worried about my brother Myron for some time now. His sudden move across the country, his vague explanations about his life there. As his older brother, I felt a responsibility to make sure he was truly okay. I felt every eye at the table turned to me, but I kept my focus on Harold, whose discomfort was becoming more evident by the second. Mr. Blackwell is a private investigator who I hired to check on Myron's welfare. Jackson continued smoothly. I thought it was time we all knew the truth about what has been happening in Seattle. He gestured to Harold, clearly expecting him to produce the damning evidence they had discussed. Instead, Harold looked directly at me, then back to Jackson. I cannot do this, Harold said firmly. Jackson's confident smile faltered. We discussed this. Just show them what you found. Harold shook his head. What I found was not what you expected. Your brother is not a failure at all. The room fell completely silent. Harold turned to address the entire table. Myron Reynolds is the founder and chief technology officer of Paystream, one of the fastest-growing financial technology startups in the Pacific Northwest. The company operates in stealth mode to protect its intellectual property, but it recently completed a Series A funding round, valuing the company at $26 million. My family erupted in confused questions, while Jackson's face cycled through shock, disbelief, and anger. "That is ridiculous," Jackson sputtered. "He lives in a tiny apartment. He has no credentials. There is no way." I decided it was finally time to speak. I stood slowly, and the room gradually quieted again. Paystream processes over $8 million in transactions monthly for over 3,000 small business clients, I said calmly. We charge 40% less in fees than traditional processors by using proprietary blockchain verification methods I developed. Our last funding round closed at $32 million valuation, actually. Harold's information is slightly outdated. I turned to face Jackson directly. "What I do not understand is why you hired someone to investigate me in the first place. Why were you so determined to expose me as a failure?" Jackson's face flushed dark red. For a moment, I thought he might simply storm out, but instead something unexpected happened. His carefully constructed facade crumbled completely. His shoulders sagged and he sank back into his chair. "Because everything in my life is falling apart," he whispered, but in the silent dining room, everyone heard him clearly. "Meredith served me with divorce papers last month. I have lost nearly $200,000 gambling. The firm put me on performance review because I lost the Westridge account." Our mother gasped audibly. This was clearly news to everyone. No one was supposed to know. Jackson continued staring at his plate. "Everyone thinks my life is perfect. I needed to show that at least I was doing better than Myron. That at least I was not the family failure. The perfect golden child image shattered before my eyes. All those years of comparison and competition, and it turned out Jackson's perfect life was largely a fabrication held together by appearances and family expectations, just like mine had been." Our parents sat in shocked silence, processing the revelations about both their sons. The carefully cultivated narrative they had built over decades lay in ruins around the expensive china and crystal. I left the family gathering shortly after the revelations, needing space to process everything that had happened. The drive back to my hotel was a blur of confused emotions, decades of resentment colliding with an unexpected sense of liberation. My phone rang just as I reached my room, Trevor's name flashing on the screen. "Dude, Acceleration Capital just came back with an offer. $44 million for acquisition with retention packages for both of us. This is happening any other night. This would have been the most exciting news of my life. Tonight it felt like just another twist in an already surreal day." In the weeks that followed, I found myself experiencing waves of anger and vindication. I fantasized about flaunting my success to my family in increasingly elaborate ways, from buying my parents' house and evicting them to sending Jackson photos of my new car each time his gambling debts were mentioned. My therapist Lisa helped me recognize these revenge fantasies for what they were: symptoms of decades of hurt rather than constructive solutions. "Success is your best revenge, but revenge will not heal you," she reminded me weekly. I gradually refocused on what truly mattered, pouring my energy into growing Paystream and building genuine connections with people who valued me for myself. I found mentors in the tech community who provided the guidance I had always craved from my father. I built friendships with other founders who understood the unique pressures of building something from nothing. 6 months after the family gathering, Paystream had grown to 70 employees, with offices overlooking Puget Sound. We were processing over $30 million monthly in transactions and had declined 3 acquisition offers in favor of maintaining control over our vision. I was reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant informed me my father was in the lobby asking to see me. For a moment, I considered turning him away, but curiosity won out. He seemed smaller somehow, standing awkwardly in my glass-walled office, with its view of the Seattle skyline and the mountains beyond. He examined the industry awards lining my credenza with an expression I had never seen before. Something between pride and regret. "I have been wrong about you your entire life," he said finally, his voice lacking its usual authoritative tone. "I compared you to your brother because it was easy, not because it was right. I never took the time to understand how your mind works or what drives you." It was the closest thing to an apology I had ever received from him. The conversation that followed was stilted and uncomfortable, but it was a beginning. My mother visited 2 weeks later, and her conversation was more difficult filled with her justifications for the ways she had enabled the toxic comparison between Jackson and me. But she was trying in her own way. Jackson hit rock bottom before he started to rebuild. He lost his job at the firm, and his divorce was finalized with substantial alimony payments. When he called me sounding desperate, I agreed to help with one condition. He enter a rehabilitation program for his gambling addiction. I would cover the costs, but I would not enable his self-destruction. The first honest conversation we had as adults, without the shadow of competition, happened in a coffee shop near his rehabilitation center. For the first time, I saw my brother as a flawed human being, rather than the impossible standard I had been measured against. I spent my whole life terrified of failing, he admitted, staring into his coffee. Every achievement just raised the bar for the next thing I had to accomplish. I never enjoyed any of it because I was too busy worrying about maintaining the image. I recognized more of myself in him than I wanted to admit. We had both been shaped by the same impossible expectations, just in different ways. When Paystream went public 18 months after that fateful family dinner, I officially became worth over $60 million on paper. The financial success felt almost anticlimactic compared to the personal growth I had experienced. The money provided security and opportunities, but it did not heal the wounds of my childhood. That required the harder work of therapy, boundaries, and forgiveness, not for my family's sake, but for my own peace. The most recent family gathering was different from any that came before it. The competition and comparison had been replaced with a cautious authenticity. Jackson was 9 months sober and working at a friend's startup in a role that actually seemed to bring him satisfaction. My parents were trying in their imperfect way to build relationships with both sons based on who we actually were, rather than who they had wanted us to be. The multi-million dollars in my bank account mean far less than finally being free from needing anyone's approval. Sometimes those who try hardest to expose your failures accidentally reveal your greatest strengths instead. The real success was not the business I built, but the person I became while building it. Have you ever had someone try to tear you down, only for it to backfire completely? How did you handle family members who underestimated you? Share your stories in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, subscribe to hear more stories like this, and share with someone who might need to be reminded that success is best defined on your own terms. Thank you for listening, and remember that sometimes the people who believe in you least end up being your greatest motivation to succeed.